My twin sister stole my identity to marry a billionaire. The first time I saw my own face on national television, I almost dropped my coffee. The morning news wasn't talking about me. At least, that's what everyone believed. The headline across the screen read, "Billionaire tech CEO Ethan Black announces engagement." The camera zoomed in on Ethan standing beside a beautiful woman wearing a $1 million diamond ring. The reporters called her Isabella Carter. My name. My face. My smile. Except it wasn't me. It was my identical twin sister, Olivia. She had stolen my identity so perfectly that even the news couldn't tell the difference. I stood frozen in my apartment, staring at the television while my entire life was being rewritten by someone who shared my face but never shared my heart. My name is Isabella Carter, and this is the story of how my own sister stole my identity to marry one of the richest men in America, and how one forgotten fingerprint destroyed the biggest lie she had ever told. Growing up, people could never tell Olivia and me apart. We were identical twins born only 3 minutes apart in Boston, Massachusetts. Same blue eyes. Same dark brown hair. Same smile. Even our own teachers mixed us up. But anyone who truly knew us understood we were nothing alike. Olivia loved attention. She loved expensive things, designer clothes, luxury vacations, and being the center of every room she entered. I preferred quiet mornings, libraries, hiking trails, and coffee shops where nobody knew my name. Our grandmother used to say we had identical faces but completely different souls. She was right. Our parents unintentionally made things worse. Whenever Olivia got into trouble, someone eventually rescued her. If she failed an exam, my father hired a tutor. If she crashed the family car, my mother convinced everyone it wasn't entirely her fault. She learned early that charm could erase consequences. I learned that responsibility rarely received applause. Still, despite everything, she was my sister. We shared birthdays, bedrooms, secrets, and dreams. I believed blood mattered more than competition. Looking back, I was the only one who believed that. After college, our lives moved in opposite directions. I became a financial analyst in New York. The job wasn't glamorous, but I loved solving problems and building a career on my own. Olivia moved to Los Angeles hoping to become a social media influencer. She posted glamorous pictures, attended celebrity parties, and constantly talked about finding a wealthy husband. Every phone call eventually became a conversation about money. She would laugh and say that working hard was outdated when rich men existed. I always laughed politely, assuming she was exaggerating. Unfortunately, she wasn't joking. About 2 years later, I met Ethan Black. It happened by accident. I was working late one evening when a client accidentally left an important folder in a conference room. I chased him into the parking garage and handed it back just before he drove away. That client happened to be Ethan. At the time, I didn't recognize him. To me, he was simply a polite man in a navy suit who thanked me for my honesty. A week later, flowers arrived at my office with a handwritten note inviting me to dinner. I almost declined because I didn't date clients. Then I discovered he was no longer assigned to our company. So I accepted. Our first date lasted nearly 5 hours. Ethan wasn't what the internet described. Articles called him ruthless, brilliant, and intimidating. I found him thoughtful, funny, and surprisingly humble. He listened more than he talked. He remembered little details. He asked about my family instead of talking about his money. By the end of the evening, I liked him, not because he was wealthy, but because he treated me like an equal. For the next 8 months, our relationship remained private. Ethan hated publicity, and I hated attention. It worked perfectly. We spent weekends hiking, cooking dinner together, and escaping the city whenever possible. Only a few close friends knew we were dating. My family didn't. I wanted to be certain before introducing someone so important into my complicated family. Eventually, I made the mistake of telling Olivia. She acted excited. She hugged me. She asked 100 questions. What was he like? How rich was he? Did he own private jets? Did he have security? At first, I thought she was simply curious. Then she asked to see a picture. I showed her one photograph of Ethan and me standing beside a lake during a weekend trip. She stared at it much longer than I expected. Then she smiled. A strange smile. I asked what she was thinking. She quickly handed my phone back and said she was happy for me. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it was the beginning. A month later, Ethan invited me to a charity gala in Chicago. It was one of the few public events he couldn't avoid because his company was sponsoring the hospital fundraiser. I planned to fly there on Friday morning. 2 days before the event, I received an email that appeared to come from the airline. It informed me that my flight had been cancelled because of severe weather and instructed me to rebook using a provided link. Without thinking, I followed the instructions. The new flight wasn't until Saturday afternoon. Friday evening, Ethan called. He sounded confused. He asked why I never arrived. I told him my flight had been cancelled. There was a long silence. Then he quietly said something that made no sense. "But I saw you." I laughed. "No, you didn't." He insisted. He said I had attended the charity dinner. I told him he must have mistaken someone else. He sounded uncertain. Finally, we agreed to talk when I arrived the next day. When I reached Chicago, Ethan met me at the hotel entrance. The moment he saw me, the color disappeared from his face. He looked at me. Then he looked behind me. Then back at me again. He whispered, "How is this possible?" I asked what was wrong. Instead of answering, he opened his phone. He showed me photographs taken the previous night. There was a woman standing beside him on the red carpet. She looked exactly like me. She wore a black evening gown. She smiled at cameras. She held Ethan's arm. Reporters had photographed them together for hours. I felt my stomach drop, because I knew exactly who it was. Olivia. I tried to explain that I had never been there. Ethan believed me, but he couldn't understand how someone else looked exactly like me. For almost a minute after Olivia hung up, I couldn't move. My apartment felt strangely quiet, but my mind was racing. My passport was gone. My birth certificate was gone. Even my social security card had disappeared. Those weren't things that simply vanished. Someone had taken them, and the only person who knew exactly where I kept them was my twin sister. I called Ethan immediately. The moment he answered, I told him everything. There was a long silence. Finally, he spoke. "Isabella, I think this is much bigger than identity theft." I asked him what he meant. He took a deep breath. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. The woman he believed was me had spent nearly 3 weeks around him. 3 weeks. She attended charity events, private dinners, business functions. She met members of his executive team. She even visited his family's estate in Connecticut. Everyone believed she was me. She knew enough about my childhood, my college years, and even my favorite books that nobody questioned her identity. I suddenly remembered something. Every time Olivia visited me over the last year, she asked strange questions. What was Ethan's favorite restaurant? Which watch did he wear every day? Did he like dogs or cats? What was his assistant's name? At the time, I thought she was just being curious. Now I understood. She had been studying me, studying him, planning everything. Ethan immediately contacted his private security team. Within hours, they began reviewing surveillance footage from the charity gala. Meanwhile, I drove straight to the police station. The detective listened carefully, but when I explained that my identical twin had stolen my documents, he looked skeptical. He asked if I had proof. I handed him old family photographs, birth certificates, school records, everything. He nodded slowly. Then he explained something I hadn't considered. If Olivia had used my identity to obtain financial benefits, sign legal documents, or enter into marriage fraud, the consequences could be enormous. Not just civil, criminal. For the first time, I realized my own sister could go to prison. That thought didn't make me happy. It made me sad. I never wanted revenge. I only wanted my life back. Later that evening, Ethan arrived at my apartment. He looked exhausted. He handed me a tablet. Inside were hundreds of photographs from recent public events. Every picture showed Olivia pretending to be me. She copied my hairstyle, my clothes, even the necklace my grandmother gave me. Then Ethan enlarged one photograph. My heart nearly stopped. Olivia was wearing my grandmother's necklace. The real one, not a copy. I immediately ran to my jewelry box. It was gone. She hadn't only stolen my identity, she had stolen pieces of my life. Ethan quietly asked me one question. When was the last time you changed the passwords to your email and cloud storage? I froze. Never. Olivia knew my childhood password. The same password I'd used for years. I grabbed my laptop. Within seconds, I realized someone had logged into my email account from Los Angeles several times over the past 6 months. They had downloaded documents, travel itineraries, personal photographs, scanned copies of my identification. Everything. She had spent months building a perfect version of me. The next morning, Ethan's head of security called. His name was Marcus. He had spent the entire night investigating. He asked us to meet immediately. When we arrived at his office, he placed a large folder on the table. Inside were security reports, private investigator notes, and something unexpected. A marriage license application. My name appeared on it. Isabella Carter. But I had never signed it. Marcus pointed to the signature. Then he looked at me. Did you write this? I shook my head. He nodded. We didn't think so. Then he explained that Ethan had recently proposed. Not publicly, privately, to the woman he believed was me. According to legal records, the wedding was scheduled in 12 days. I stared at the paper. 12 days. My own twin sister was about to legally become the wife of one of the richest men in America. Using my identity, I looked at Ethan. He looked completely devastated. He blamed himself. He kept apologizing. I grabbed his hand. This isn't your fault. He looked at me. I should have known. I smiled sadly. No. You fell in love with someone wearing my face. Before either of us could say anything else, Marcus interrupted. He had discovered something even stranger. Olivia wasn't acting alone. Bank records showed several large payments from an unknown account. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Transferred over several months. Someone was financing her. Someone powerful. Marcus continued digging. An hour later, he returned with another file. The payments originated from one company, Sterling Global Holdings. I recognized the name immediately. They were Ethan's biggest corporate competitor. The room became silent. Marcus looked at Ethan, then quietly said, "We don't think this is just about marriage anymore. It looks like corporate espionage." Everything suddenly made sense. Olivia hadn't only wanted Ethan's money. She wanted access. Private meetings, business information, company secrets. She had been planted inside his life. Ethan immediately contacted federal investigators. The case changed overnight. Identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, corporate espionage, conspiracy. It was becoming national news. Meanwhile, Olivia had no idea. She believed her plan was working perfectly. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. It was a luxury wedding magazine. The headline made me sick. Billionaire Ethan Black to marry Isabella Carter this Saturday. Below the headline was a full-page photograph. Olivia, wearing my smile, using my name, living my future. I looked at Ethan. He quietly closed the magazine. Then he asked me one question. "What do you want to do?" I looked at the wedding invitation lying on the table. Then I smiled. They've planned a wedding. Let's give them a surprise they'll never forget. Because in 5 days, I wasn't going to stop the wedding before it started. I was going to walk into the ceremony, right before the vows, and let the entire world decide which twin was the real Isabella Carter. The wedding day arrived faster than I expected. I barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Olivia standing at the altar wearing my name, my identity, and the life that should have been mine. But by sunrise, the fear had disappeared. All that remained was determination. Ethan's legal team had already informed the FBI, local police, and the district attorney's office. They all agreed on one thing. Olivia had to believe she had one. If we confronted her before the ceremony, she might disappear. But if she walked into the wedding believing everything was under her control, there would be nowhere left to run. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock that afternoon at Blackwood Estate, one of the most luxurious private properties in California. Nearly 500 guests had arrived. Billionaires, celebrities, politicians, CEOs, and international media filled the gardens. News helicopters circled overhead. Every major network was broadcasting the wedding live. Meanwhile, I was sitting inside a black SUV parked half a mile away. Marcus, Ethan's head of security, looked at me. "You ready?" I looked out the window toward the estate. Then I nodded. I've been ready my whole life. Inside the mansion, Olivia was living the dream she had stolen. She wore a custom-designed wedding dress worth more than most people's homes. She was surrounded by makeup artists, photographers, and wedding planners. Everyone called her Isabella. Everyone believed she was me. She smiled for every camera. She laughed with Ethan's family. She hugged guests. Not a single person suspected the bride wasn't who she claimed to be. At exactly 4 o'clock, the music began. The string quartet started playing. Guests stood. Olivia slowly walked down the aisle holding a bouquet of white roses. She looked confident. She looked beautiful. She looked exactly like me. Ethan stood at the altar wearing a black tuxedo. From a distance, nobody could tell he already knew the truth. He smiled. He played his part perfectly. The minister welcomed everyone. Then he began speaking about love, trust, honesty, and lifelong commitment. The irony almost made me laugh. Just before the vows began, Marcus received a message through his earpiece. He looked at me. "It's time." The large wooden doors at the back of the ceremony opened. "Hayes." An FBI agent walked into the ceremony. She displayed her badge. The whispers became louder. Then Marcus rolled a large television screen into the center of the room. The first image appeared. Security footage from the charity gala. The second image appeared. Airport surveillance. The third. Hotel records. Passport scans. Phone locations. Every movement. Every lie. Every fake signature. Everything. Then Agent Hayes held up 2 passports. One belonged to me. One belonged to Olivia. Except, my passport had my fingerprint. Olivia's passport had hers. She smiled nervously, then said fingerprints proved nothing. Agent Hayes smiled back. "Actually, they proved everything." She explained that every biometric passport issued in the United States stores fingerprint verification. Government alerts. Nobody arrested her immediately because investigators wanted to understand the full fraud. The room became completely silent. Then Ethan's attorney stood. He explained that the marriage license had never been finalized, because Ethan insisted on one final identity verification before signing. Olivia had no idea. The verification appointment had been scheduled. Then she realized something. The wedding had never been legally completed. Everything she had done, everything she had risked, had failed. She suddenly ran. Security officers moved instantly. Within seconds. She begged me to help her. She kept saying she was my sister. For several seconds, I simply looked at her. I remembered birthdays, Christmas mornings, shared bedrooms, late-night conversations. I remembered every opportunity she had to stop, every chance she had to tell the truth. She chose greed every single time. I quietly looked at Agent Hayes. Then I nodded. The agents placed handcuffs on Olivia. The cameras captured everything. Every television station in America would broadcast those images before sunset. As she was escorted away, she turned toward me one final time. Tears streamed down her face. She whispered, "I'm sorry." They came too late. Several weeks later, the criminal investigation uncovered even more. Olivia had accepted millions of dollars from Sterling Global Holdings. She had planned to gain access to Ethan's confidential business information after the wedding. Internal company documents, future acquisitions, private investor meetings. It had never been about love. It had never even been about marriage. She eventually accepted a plea agreement and received a lengthy prison sentence for identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and corporate espionage. My parents were devastated. Not because Olivia was arrested. Because they realized they had ignored every warning sign for years. One evening, my mother came to my apartment. She cried harder than I had ever seen. She admitted they had always protected Olivia instead of correcting her. Every lie, every manipulation, every excuse. They had helped create the person she became. My father apologized too. He said something I never forgot. The greatest mistake parents can make is confusing love with permission. Months later, life slowly returned to normal. Ethan and I started over. Not with expensive parties. Not with interviews. Not with headlines. Just dinner, walks, coffee, trust. 1 year later, he proposed again. This time, there were no cameras, no reporters, no billionaires. Just the two of us beside the same quiet lake where we had shared our first weekend together. He smiled, then said, "I almost married someone wearing your face." He gently held my hand. "But I fell in love with your heart." I smiled through tears. Then I said yes. Our wedding took place 6 months later. Only close friends. Family. No media. No publicity. As I walked down the aisle, I realized something. My sister had stolen my name. She had stolen my documents. She had even stolen my face. But there was one thing she could never steal. The truth. Because identities can be forged. Documents can be copied. Faces can be imitated. But character always reveals the real person in the end. And that was the only identity that ever truly mattered.